Central Institute of Indian Languages, as you know, is one of the premier institutions engaged in the area of language, literature and culture. And most of what we do are relevant not just for the people who teach languages, but people who wish to work on any area of language, including the language and society interface, or language and technology interface, or language and culture interface, even in the areas like language and mass media or language and communication. Now, this being the spread of the institute, it is naturally relevant that we are multidisciplinary. We have people who are specialized in so many areas, and also we work on not just one language but for many languages. Now, fortunately, India is a situation which is a natural laboratory for us, and we have numerous languages to work on, so many different kinds of religion and language interface and culture and language interface. And if you look at the spectrum of India, starting from the northeast, which is much unknown still to anthropologists and linguists, to the western part of India, which also has its own share of numerous tribal languages and languages of special groups, or from down south to the north, we have really a wonderful mosaic of human languages. And what's important to understand is that a lot of these languages have somehow survived for hundreds of years, for maybe thousands of years. In fact, we don't even talk in terms of decades, we talk in terms of hundreds, because the changes come by very slowly in the Indian subcontinent, but when they come quite significantly. What we notice is that in the Indian setup, we have had a lot of intermixture of races, and we have a lot of people coming from different cultures, different histories, different countries and communities, and it has taken time for them to get assimilated into the Indian milieu. But once they have assimilated, they have contributed on their own by enriching the culture, the society and the languages that we live in. Now, this is the crux of Indian culture and languages, that they have been enriched right from the beginning by numerous traditions. So, when we have on one hand Sanskritic tradition, on the other hand we have very nice Perso-Arabic tradition, and our literature and our songs and our dance patterns, including our physical look, the shape, the structure of the people, and all kinds of habits, the social habits, cultural habits, have come from many of these different sources. So, this being the case, the challenge is enormous for any institution which wants to represent the entire Indian languages, literature and culture scenario, and make a sense of what India stands for. Now, it's very difficult because a lot of people abroad, when you go abroad, they ask you, can I learn Indian language? In fact, I have had a very nice email from somebody who says that I have learned Chinese and I have learned Korean, can I learn Indian? And then I had to write back saying that, well, you can't learn Indian, you have to learn many Indian. Which Indian do you want to learn? So, this is something which is very peculiar for people to understand, because Sweden you have Swedish, and Holland you have Dutch, and German you have German. Why is it so there is no Indian language? There are so many different kinds of Indian languages. Now, that is something which is very peculiar about India, and the only point is that a lot of other countries hide this diversity, whereas India doesn't want to hide the diversity. And if you just take our neighbors, say China for instance, China says that it has one Chinese language, and so many billion people read the newspapers every day in the morning, which are probably pronounced differently in different parts of China, but read in the same way, through the same script, through the same writing system. But the fact of the matter is that China has another 44 languages. It has 45 languages. But the other minorities are not really made prominent. They're not given their place which is due. Whereas in case of India, it is not exactly the case. In fact, we have enshrined in our constitution that we will provide protection to minorities. We will have let our speakers of different languages grow the way they would like to grow, and so on and so forth. So I think the difference in the Indian polity lies in the political statement that we have made right from the day one as we became independent after 1947, after our constitution came into place, that we would definitely encourage major languages because they share a major burden of our communicability. Now we have these 18 languages today through which lots of communication takes place, and they also act, in fact they have two different roles as I see it. One role of each of these major languages is that they are a major language, a major force, language of education, language of instruction, and language of development. On the other hand, the other important point is they are also linked languages. It's very difficult to imagine that there is a physical boundary which will separate Karnataka from Maharashtra, which will separate the Odiyas and the Telugus. It doesn't always match with the geographical boundary and geographical shape. And it's very interesting that many of these languages for long areas, lot of areas, miles together, they are used as languages of the link. And this important aspect of our major languages we often tend to forget. For instance, to give one example, if you knew Assamese and if you were traveling in different parts of the erstwhile Nifa area, which is now divided into so many, we call it 7 sisters in Northeast, different states. With your Assamese, you could manage to communicate with the traders, with people asking for directions and things like that, which means that all said and done, Assamese is being used as a link, as a temporary arrangement, as a kind of negotiation among different communities. Same is the case within Nagaland, for instance, where we have 12, 13 different Naga languages, each one so different from the other. On many of these our colleagues have worked. Now, how do you go from one to the other? The Nagas, therefore, themselves have created a variety called Nagamese, and they are, in a very interesting manner, mixing vocabulary of their own various dialects, languages, whatever you call them, with Assamese, with some kind of Hindi, with some English, and that is emerging as a marketplace pidgin. So as you see, our languages are performing dual role. One is becoming a role for acting as a catalytic force, for instance. And although in a given state you have lots of people living together, people speaking different languages, but when they come to the school, at least all of them have one common language, which is the state language which they learn, no matter where you come from originally. And in fact, over the period of time, over the months and years, they become very important for our own school students, because they become very proficient in those languages and they are not necessarily as proficient in the mother tongue. So in not one context, but in many different contexts, this particular language is used. So this is how the language becomes a catalytic force. And what you can,
yes sir,
as I was telling you about the challenge before the institution such as CIIL, which has to deal with such gigantic landscape of human languages as India offers. The main problem that, as I see it from my perspective, is that such a huge task cannot be performed by pure number of experts, by creating or replicating the number of experts who will work on these languages. Because as you would notice, each language has so many aspects of it, the written aspect of it, the spoken aspect of it, the cultural aspect of it, the social aspect of it, the communication and mass media aspect of it. On top of that, within the linguistic levels of a human language, we have the sound, the meaning, the sentences, and whatnot. Now, imagine that for each of these aspects you create a specialist who will work on each of our languages. We require numerous specialists, and I don't think India can afford to train and house and fund such a huge activity of manpower to work on so many of these languages. So what is the alternative? Now, I've been really wondering, as a teacher of languages and linguistics in a university where I've been for 20 years before coming here, what is the alternative? Well, the alternative that I see it is really relating our languages to technology. And unless we focus on language technology, and unless we have a very solid manpower which is developed in the area of language technology, and we also bring out the technological tools, we cannot really take our development of Indian languages to a level, to a height where it can match with the developed languages of the world. So the challenge before our languages and challenge before our institution is to come and suggest new ways of taking our languages off. They have to take off. Now, as you know, the technology bus is driven by English, and technology bus, of course, we know that French and German and also other languages of the Europe and also Japanese, they're trying very hard to get into this bus. But we will surely miss the bus unless we take a plunge and we do something so that our languages are also equally equipped as natural languages, as languages of computation, as languages of the net, so that we don't really miss out the bus. Now, if that is possible, then we can develop our languages and our people and our literature in a manner which will make it very respectable for the entire international community. That's what I think. I think the future of an institution like this would lie in not just linking up language with technology, but also creating such technological tools which will make it possible for more and more common man, writers, translators, teachers of languages, students studying in schools and colleges, maybe part-time working on languages, part-time something else, to contribute to the development of languages. At this point of time, we are not really equipped in a manner in which many of the Western languages have equipped themselves. Now, one can say that the management of Western languages is easier because the variation is less and number of people is less. On the other hand, I would say that our advantage is that we have so much of human beings, so much of pure manpower, that manpower itself can be turned into a strength, provided we link up our languages with our technology and development of tools and techniques for them, which make it possible for more and more people, wider number of people, to make use of those technologies. Now, at this point of time, I think it's a very crucial stage at which we are placed, a very crucial moment of time in history we are placed, where this institution should play a major role, forgetting about what has not been possible to do so far. So far it has not been possible to do so many things because we have been only developing ourselves, thinking of developing ourselves in a manner which our time, our past time offered us. Now, since the present time offers us enormous opportunities thanks to the development of information technology, thanks to the development of sciences, and thanks to the development of economics of the people, because the people were also initially worried in the initial independent India, worried about, what we call do waqt ki roti. They were just worried about the basic necessary facilities that human beings need. But since many of these have been taken care of at this point of time, either by the government or by the people or by the business houses, in whichever manner. Now you can give the credit to one planet or the other, give the credit to one government or the other. Doesn't matter. In some ways, India has made a progress so that we have very favorable balance of payment situation, very, very high reserves and good economic prospects. The country is really looking up. But at this point of time, when the country is looking up, what are we doing in the area of language and literature, in the area of language development? Are we also looking up equally? Are we also planning? Are we also getting ready to take advantage of this situation?
Yeah, right. Ravi? Yes, sir?
I've been often wondering, what is the role of an institution like CIIL, Central Institute of Indian Languages, in the midst of so many different language-related institutions in India? Now, if you look at the other institutions dealing with social sciences and humanities, for instance, let me give you an example of Archaeological Survey of India. There are not 5 Archaeological Surveys of India. Anthropological Survey of India, there is only one. And on the other hand, if you look at a place like CIIL, you will have numerous language institutions. First, within our own ministry, we have at least about 5 other language institutions, one dealing with Sindhi, another one with Urdu, a third one with Hindi, and a fourth one on Sanskrit. And in addition to this, we have these state language academies, which are part of each of these different states. And then under the UGC mold, we have the language universities. We have the Telugu University and Tamil University and Kannada University and Dravidian University. So what does a place like CIIL do in that case? If there are so many of these language institutions in the middle of all this, there must be some role which should be reserved for an apex institution like the Central Institute of Indian Languages. And as I was looking at the history of the science of linguistics in India, the way it evolved, it's probably the newest disciplines with psychology. Linguistics is probably the newest disciplines in India, whereas language studies are not. Language studies have been going on in India for quite some time.
From the beginning, sir.
I have often been wondering what would be the role of an institution like CIIL in the middle of numerous language-related institutions. We have state language academies, we have the language-based universities like Telugu, Tamil, Kannada University, Dravidian University, for instance. And we also have so many other language institutions within our own ministry. One for Hindi, another for Sanskrit, third for Sindhi, one for Urdu. So if there are these so many language institutions, then what is special about the CIIL? That must be established. Now I think there are two answers to these, and one answer comes from the age of the discipline with which we are more concerned, that is linguistics. And that is that the discipline of linguistics started in India practically only in 1950s, whereas the discipline of Indian languages has been going on, the study of Indian languages, the grammatical tradition of Indian languages or the literary tradition of Indian languages, this has been going on for age on, for so many 100 years, in the formal system also and also in the informal system. And if you look at the ancient Indian languages, whether you take the Persian tradition or the Arabic tradition or the Sanskritic tradition or the Tibetan tradition, for instance, all these studies have been going on for practically hundreds or thousands of years, which means we have had two sources of study of languages anyway in India, one for Indian languages in general and another which is the modern discipline of linguistics. Now an institution like the CIIL is trying to combine these two, and in fact in that respect one major step which was taken by one of the former directors of the institute, Professor Annamalai, in coordination with philosophers like Daya Krishna, is the dialogue which they started between the linguistics people, the modern linguistics people, and the traditional grammarians in India. And I think that's one of the key areas in which the institute has moved in and has made a lot of profit, intellectual as well as the academic honor wise in this area. And the results of these, some of these are slowly percolating down into our own either software direction making or in the production of books or in our writing or in our understanding of the theory. Because one critical point that is always made by the linguists who look at our discipline from outside India towards the Indian linguistics is that this has been the hub of the linguistic theory from the beginning of knowledge systems in the world. And yet at this point of time, when we look at the theory of linguistics or theory of human languages, there is not much that we have been contributing of late. So what can we contribute? Where can we contribute more? I think that discovery has to be made by an institution like CIIL, which makes the connections between languages. Now we connect Hindi, we may not be dealing with Hindi in toto, but we connect Hindi with other Indian languages. We are not concentrating on Sanskrit as such, but then we connect Sanskrit with our modern Indian languages. If you look at this, then that means that we are really making connections. We are really building kind of relationships between one language and the other, one community and the other. And therefore, our job in the CIIL would be to bring out certain kinds of connections that we make and come up and result it and throw up a kind of theoretical discovery from these connections that we make. So one is that we are connecting between society and language, and then culture and language. And as I said earlier, we are really trying to build bridges between different disciplines. So from that angle also, we have to come up with certain theoretical points, certain theoretical initiatives and ideas which will make it possible to say that, look, this is the contribution of the Indian linguists to the language science in general in today's context. So I think one aspect of the institution becomes very clear, one goal of the institution becomes very clear, to make its mark in the area of theoretical and applied linguistics, but derive the theory from the application, from the wide field that India offers, the South Asia offers in general, and then come up with certain points which will make it look very innovative, which will make it look very profitable for the other third world and developing countries also to derive from. So that in that context, I think the role of this institution is very different from all the other language related institutions which are focusing on a given language or one kind of language and culture. So that I would think it would be an achievement if this institution can do.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, sir.
There are different perceptions of the future of a discipline or a future of an institute like this. In fact, the future of the CIIL is very, very closely related with the future and the success or possible success of the discipline in linguistics. Because if the discipline fails in the country, I don't see any future for the institute. So therefore, one important endeavor that the institute has to make is to see that the teaching and learning of the discipline called linguistics succeeds in the country. And therefore, there is this future task which has been, in fact, which was mentioned in 1969 document when the institution was created, that this institute will be responsible for creating a relationship among all the language and linguistics teaching departments of the country, apart from doing whatever it is supposed to do. There is another point that was mentioned there in 1969 document, that is, this institution will be responsible also for the language technology aspect of India. Now, the way I look at the future of this institution is that there has to be at least 3 major areas into which we should branch, and I would call them the 3 L's, and one of them is language technology. And there is no doubt about it that unless we ride the wave of IT and make our languages enabled, IT enabled, make our people who are speaking and using these languages IT enabled, make our school students take the maximum benefit while studying these languages through the advancements that have taken place in language technology and IT. It's impossible for us to create a couple of lakhs of primary school teachers who will look at, we may have decided that all our common people must be educated through the mother tongue. But then how do we implement that? In fact, in one of my papers, I looked at this aspect and I found that we need to create maybe 10 or 20 lakhs of very, very able primary school teachers who will be able to implement this decision of the government of India. This is a 1954 decision of UNESCO which we have accepted in our education ministers conference in 54, and yet we are not able to implement this decision. Now we cannot really do this because it's just too much to create, too much money is needed, too much of finance is needed to create so much of manpower. Now when we cannot produce tens or 20 lakhs of primary school teacher to take care of the mother tongue medium of instruction, then something must be done vis-a-vis language technology. Now, as we know, television has penetrated into all parts of India. We know the radio penetration has been tremendous in different parts of India. And therefore, one should take advantage of this media penetration in the remote corners of India and the advancements that have taken place in the satellite technology vis-a-vis India, and also the language technology that has developed in Indian languages. So if we marry these 3 and we can create programs which will be self-sustaining, which will be enabling the teachers of languages to bring the speakers of various smaller languages into the fold of school education, into the fold of higher education, that will be a great achievement, I think. So therefore, language technology here can play a very major role through this institution to bring in a great change. One of the most important things I see in the school education sector is to arrest the dropout of the school children. A large number of people drop out and a large number of people fail, and this is not just a question of India. It is also the question of entire South Asia. In fact, in one of the surveys that was conducted in Nepal, they found out that the largest number of failures come in the languages. So it's not just question of India, it's entire South Asia. We can benefit the entire South Asian countries a lot by looking at our own languages, by creating materials, and by relating this material through the technology. So this is one area, I think. The second area is to focus on the second aspect of the future plan has to do with building up the lexical resources. For any meaningful work in either language technology or in writing grammars or in preparing literacy materials or even developing things like corpora, the most important and most essential thing is the lexical databases and lexical resources. Now, starting with the examples of Amarakosha in India, we have had an excellent tradition of dictionary making or thesaurus making in the Indian setup, and of course we have had also our own dictionaries in various Indian languages which have come up in last 200 years. But the trouble is we have no agency which is like the Oxford dictionary, which is like the Chambers tradition, which is like the Monier-Williams Sanskrit dictionary, whether it is an individual effort like Monier-Williams or it's an institutional effort like Oxford. None of this we have. We have had our own success stories, we have had our own great discographers in one language or the other, but there is no sustained tradition of dictionary making in India. And then we have only one or two or three different kinds of dictionaries. The fact that the same lexical resources, same lexical databases can be made use of for numerous kinds of products, products like word finder. Now I am a writer, I am looking for a particular word. I know the meaning, but I don't know how to exactly reach the word. Now how do I reach the word? There must be some technique, some technology. At this point of time, we are purely depending on our own mental resources, our own intellectual faculty. A person who is good enough in remembering, memorizing and recalling a word recalls the word. A person who is not so good enough but otherwise may be very, very dexterous in writing, maybe is beautiful in writing styles, but there is no help, no technological help available for that kind of person. So at this point of time, what we do is we write one dictionary and we just prepare a student's edition out of it. We prepare an official edition out of it. We really don't plan 4 or 5 different kinds of dictionaries. We cannot do that because we have no lexical resources. We haven't really built our lexical resources. So the tradition of dictionary making is absolutely missing in India. So I think what we are now seeing in the market, we of course would come across 20 different dictionaries in Hindi and 50 different dictionaries in Bengali, but these are all rehashing of the same dictionary. It's the same things which are coming again and again in different garb, in different book covers, jackets. So I know this is not something which is a progress. A progress of a language can be gauged by the lexical resources that you build up. And I think it is very essential that this L, the second L, the lexical resources, should also be emphasized very, very significantly. And this again is not one person's job. You need a whole team to build lexical resources. You need people who will do marking, for instance, who will do the tagging. So they must be good in syntax. You need people who are good in technology, who will create a DBMS package, database structure. You need people who are very good in etymology, good in Sanskrit, good in Persian, good in Arabic, to bring out the best of the dictionary making history of a particular word. You need people who are very good in giving the examples or culling out the examples out of texts. So that means that you need also a technology which will look at large texts of a newspaper last 1 year and bring out how many words have come up which don't exist in the current dictionaries. So as you can see, you need maybe 20 different kinds of people to create a lexical resources. It's not just a simple task of one person sitting with the cards and a shoebox and putting the cards in the box and reshuffling the cards again and again to create a dictionary. That's an old concept which is gone. Today, if you look at the way chambers work, today we look at the way the French dictionary gets created and updated, it's really significant. And in that respect, the progress that is made by once again I bring the language technology issue of the Europeans who are working on their own languages is significant. So we have somebody like Maurice Gross who comes up with the language technology software, where every day he takes a dump from the French newspaper Le Monde, and at the end of the week he churns out a mini dictionary which will tell us what are the new words which have come in that week, which don't exist in the French dictionary existing. You can imagine at the end of the 52nd edition, that's at the end of the year, we have a beautiful dictionary which is compiled of all new expressions and new ways of combining words. Now this is something which is absolutely missing in our setup. We have the technology, we have the people, we have the experts. We also have the newspapers, and now we have them in electronic forms. Most newspapers are now available also in the web form, the major newspapers I am saying. And I'm sure if we convince the newspaper houses that this is very important for us to build lexical resources, they will all cooperate. So we have all the necessary ingredients and all the manpower, but somebody has to make the connection. Some institution must take the responsibility of assuring the newspaper houses that, look, your copyrighted items are not going to be misused, so please cooperate with us. And also have to find enough funding for the people who are specialists in different areas to come together to sit in a team and build lexical resources. So I think this is the second area in which I would like to take the institution to. The third area. The third area, which I think is very significant, also begins with an L, and that happens to be called in the American language the LDC, the Linguistic Data Consortium. Now, if you look at the way the English language has progressed the world over, we have an LDC in the University of Pennsylvania, which was built up painstakingly over the last 30-40 years by numerous people, by a number of people. Of course, initially with the government initiative, but later on the market forces created their own initiatives. You know, the point that I am trying to make is that the major languages of India, which are spoken by 96% of people, in which we have numerous television channels taking interest, filmmaking going on, writing going on, and so much of market is connected with these languages. They will always be able to throw up lots of support for building up something called an LDC. Now, what's an LDC? You know, in a language, say Hindi for instance, which is used in films, which is used for political speech, which is used for commercial purposes, in the share market, in the market forces, which is used for advertisements, which is used for tender notices, the government offices, file notings. You can see there are about 70-80 different areas in which Hindi is used currently. Now, in each of these areas, somewhere it is visual, in some places it is only audio, some places it is audio and visual both combined, in some places it is purely handwriting, in some places it is printing, somewhere it is only typewriting or computation. We have different kinds of examples of uses of the language called Hindi. Now, there is no place in India where for a major language or a nationally important language or official language such as of the country, a large country like Hindi in India. Now, we want, of course, the Hindi to go into UN, but then we have to take the steps also ourselves. For such languages, for such major languages, we don't have one place where you can have a whole consortium for all kinds of samples of use of Hindi. If someone today wants to write down how exactly to train the news readers in television, I'm sure those who have been listening to news would find all kinds of quality of Hindi news reading. Hindi news reading, unfortunately today, in spite of so many years of television, is not comparable to English news reading or BBC or CNN. Why is it so? We don't lack in technology, nor do we lack in manpower, who are important. And then the most important point is that in case of Hindi news reading, what we need to do is to train the news readers as to how exactly the speech will flow, how exactly would be the pronunciation pattern, what is the standard. We have to set some kind of a standard. Now, a training of this kind is impossible to conceive of unless we have an LDC of an ideal person who's reading, reciting, speaking, and the manner which is considered to be ideal, not the manner which is prescribed from above, but the manner. We know the public speakers, we know the eminent people who speak in a very nice voice, nice diction, and we must be able to make use of that for training of our own people. I think we can cut here. Somebody has come? Should we start?
Yes.
Another important point about the LDC, as you know, is the training that is very important in various respects vis-a-vis speech. To give you one example, one concrete example, now we have these television news readers. Now, in spite of all our best efforts, the news reading style, news reading diction, and the pronunciation, the way a particular name which belongs to a different language is read in Hindi, is still not up to the mark, still not comparable to the CNN or BBC English news reading. Now, we have no dearth of good reciters, people who have very good voices, people who have very good diction, people who can speak very well, but somehow the people who are supposed to do the news reading or the presentation on the mass media, television or radio, there has not been much of a major kind of training for this kind of a purpose. Now, one can of course say that there are some naturally evolving good speakers and people who are very good in making presentations. But other than that, since the number of channels have multiplied, since the news coverage has become enormous, since we are now depending on a lot of on-the-spot coverage, so we require really mass-scale training of a large number of people who are involved in television today. Now, this is possible provided you have a model of speech available of the good speakers, of the people who are good public speakers, or people who lecture well, people who can teach well, people who recite poems very well, etc. Now, there is no one place where you have a consortium of the entire speech styles available, the range of speech which is available in Hindi for these people to really gain from. So, I think it is very important that a place like LDC is created, where I have given an example of only one kind, that is spoken language, say Hindi, but where different uses of language would be available for different purposes. To give you just yet another example, for instance, literacy. Now, we don't know, for the same literacy manuals that we prepare for a given community, it's possible that we need to alter it for women and for men. It's possible that we need to alter it for different age groups, people who are adult literate getting into the school, non-formal education, or people who are school dropouts, young people who are being brought back into school, or people who have never read how to read and write, but have attained the age of critical age of 12 by when the language gets fossilized. Now, for these different groups, you need slightly different kinds of approaches. Now, for these different approaches, you also need to know what is the language pattern like in the average age group of the same people in the same community among people who are educated. So what is essential is you must have again samples of such uses of language available in the LDC, so that you can then pick up from the LDC and structure or grade your literacy materials accordingly. So, if you look at the example of the literacy material development or the development of the news reading capabilities in the mass media. You will require how important it is to have a huge language data consortium of the Indian languages. Uses are numerous. One doesn't have to, because as your language penetrates into everything, whether it is the copywriting, where people are trained to be copywriters for the advertisement agencies, or whether it is a teacher who wants to be effective communicator in the classroom situation.
Yes, sir.
To sum up, these are the three different L's that I talked about: the language technology, lexical resources, and building up of an LDC, Linguistic Data Consortium, which should be our future endeavor of this institute. And I think in that respect the institute should be able to excel. Cut.
Yes, sir.
Let me give you the genesis of the Central Institute of Indian Languages, how it started. In fact, it started as a measure for conflict resolution. In 1963, we have had our Official Languages Act passed by the Parliament, and there was an apprehension that probably Hindi was going to be imposed over all other Indian languages in the country. And as we all know, predictably, the mass scale movement started in favor of the other Indian languages and often misconceivedly against Hindi. The fact that all of us are in the same boat, in the same development paradigm, at the same stage, struggling to become nationally important languages, officially usable languages as comparable to English, that was overlooked in the narrow political interest of different people. As a result, there was a lot of confusion and there was a lot of demands which were made on the governments of the state and the then government of India. Now, in around 1967, the sense prevailed in the intellectual setup of the country as well as among the administrators that there should be something like a Bharatiya Bhasha Samiti, and accordingly Government of India created a Bharatiya Bhasha Samiti which held its meetings in several places. The initiative in fact came from Dr. V.K.R.V. Rao, who was, as you know, responsible for many good things, being in important and key position in the Planning Commission and the Education Ministry later. Because of his initiative, this Samiti was set up, and the Samiti had several meetings in 1967, and a committee was also created under the chairmanship of Dr. A.C. Joshi, which gave certain recommendations about how a nationally important institution called National Institute of Indian Languages should be created. Now, in between, when all this was going on, in 1968, 18 January, there was also another Parliament resolution about how exactly languages are to be developed, Indian languages are to be developed. In that Parliament resolution, there were two important points. And as we all know, the nickname we know, we are familiar with three language formula. This all got generated at that point of time. So, on the one hand, it was decided to have a major national institution with a set objective of development of all Indian languages, bringing in kind of linguistic harmony among the people, among the different communities, linguistic communities, and also enrich Hindi as an official language from taking from all other Indian languages. On the other hand, it was also decided that there will be regional institutes. Initially they were called regional institutes, later on they will call regional centers under the CIIL, to give training to language teachers coming from different Indian states in other Indian languages to promote language learning on a large scale. In this part, the major role was played by linguists of that time, and this committee then met, it broadened itself and met the number of linguists, sometimes in the December 1967 and also in the first part of 1968, when it was decided that the center or the institute should be located somewhere outside Delhi, somewhere outside the game of power politics, also to assure people, and preferably in the south, also to assure people that this is not a measure to scuttle the feelings of the anti-Hindi agitators. Rather, this is a genuine effort of the Government of India to promote all Indian languages on an equal footing. And for the first time, through these resolutions, it was also pointed out that the responsibility of developing all Indian languages, major Indian languages, lies equally with Government of India. It is not simply a state subject where West Bengal is supposed to develop Bengali and Karnataka is supposed to develop Kannada, not of that kind. It was decided that it's a major responsibility of the Ministry of Education and Social Welfare under the Government of India to set up this institute, and through this institute develop all Indian languages. Accordingly, in 1969, it was decided, and there were several meetings in March and April in 1969 of different other committees. For instance, there was another committee headed by the former Education Minister Dr. Triguna Sen to consider the three-language formula, which also recommended certain things which is very relevant for the CIIL and RLCs. So it was in 1969, middle of it was decided to set up a national institute, which then was called Central Institute of Indian Languages, somewhere in south, and different places were being considered. At that point of time, the Vice Chancellor of Mysore University came up with an offer of land and facilities, as well as immediately a building to be made available to set up this kind of a national institute. And that's how on 17 July 1969 this institute was created in Mysore University.
Yes, sir.
As a result, on 17 July 1969, Central Institute of Indian Languages was created on the Mysore University campus.
Okay. Very good.
The various committees, should I start? The various committees that were
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
this is ready, the thing is ready.
Yeah.
The various committees that were set up to create the Central Institute of Indian Languages had listed out a set of objectives for this institute, and they were as follows. The institute was supposed to create linguistic harmony among different linguistic communities by teaching each other's languages. Also, by creating textbooks, it was recognized that the number of teachers and textbooks both are lacking in language teaching. So it was also entrusted with the responsibility of creating adequate number of manpower and also quality textbooks to teach Indian languages. It was decided that all the departments of linguistics, all the language academies which were functioning under different state governments, and various linguistics or Indian language related institutes such as Kendriya Hindi Sansthan or Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages or places like Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan, there will be a kind of coordinating body. This institute will function as a coordinating body among all these institutes. Thirdly, it was also decided that the institute would promote minor and minority languages and protect and document the tribal and endangered languages of India. And it is not just an institute meant for the major languages of India, also for minuscule minorities which should find their voices recorded, which should find their languages analyzed and textbooks prepared in this institute. Next, it was also decided that there will be enough impetus given to language technology in this institute. That is, through this institute, appropriate educational technology tools will be created for promotion and propagation of Indian languages. It was also decided that the institute would create translation techniques which will be very important for building bridges between one language and the other. So in all, there were numerous objectives which were listed, but the major, most important point was that the institute was also created for conflict resolution among all the linguistic communities in the state and in the union territories. Wherever problems occurred, the institute will be consulted by the state governments concerned, by the central government. So it had also this role of advising and assisting the center and the state in all matters related to Indian languages.
Yes, sir.
When I look at the future of the institute from now on, I find that there are three major areas into which this institute should proceed. The first of it is building the capability in language technology. You know, this area has been an area in which many IT institutions have been working without much success because they have been working without the assistance of linguists. Now, this institute should take a lead and work in an area which builds a bridge between the information technology, computer science, artificial intelligence and linguistics vis-a-vis Indian languages, and bring tools for common use of people which will benefit the people. So that's language technology goal. Secondly, we have been very rich in building dictionaries and thesauri thanks to Amarkosha tradition or the Tolkappiyam tradition in India. However, today we are lagging behind in setting up of any modern dictionary or lexicographical tradition. We have nothing comparable to Oxford or the Chambers or the Webster's or any other modern European languages system of building lexical resources and constantly updating these things. So we require this institute to become a major hub for the language, Indian languages, lexicographical resources. So we would call it the second goal as lexical resources building goal. The third major important point is that this should also be a clearing house for all Indian language related aspects. That is, people should be able to have access to data of various kinds in this institute. At this point of time, they can have probably access to some minor and tribal languages data in our archive, and also the language corpora which was built with the DOE funding. But what we actually require is that is the third goal of the institute, to create a linguistic data consortium or an LDC, and through this there should be a huge archive of live speeches, recorded speeches, the instant happenings, radio interviews, all kinds of plays or songs or skits or programs available in television or radio, mass media, or in films. Or it should also house, for instance, manuscripts of all kind, handwriting samples of all kind, because whether you work on OCR technology or you work on training mass media people, you require this kind of an archive to be here. So these are the three major things I see in the future of the institute should go towards this particular point. And so I think we can cut there. So.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I consider myself to be fortunate to be in a unique role of not being a part of this institution for 30 long years and coming at this institution after 3 decades exactly over, so that I can now look at what has happened in the past 30 years of the institution, where it has excelled, what it has contributed to society, and make an assessment so that we can set up the future goals in a manner which will take it off from wherever it has reached. And if it is not too much of a metaphor, I would like to dedicate the past to the excellence of this institute in 3 areas which we will call 3 T's. Now, what are these 3 T's? I think as I look at the document of the genesis of this institute, it was very clear that they realized that teachers are lacking. So, there is one T. Textbooks are lacking. This is another T. And the appropriate technology is lacking. This is the third T. And I think this institute, if you summarize the 30 years of activity of this institute, it has really created manpower. That is, about 8,000 teachers have been created through its regional language institutes, and also large number of teachers have been created for mother tongue teaching, and through refresher courses and orientation courses and national integration camps and things like that. It has also come up with a series of textbooks that it has created, and I think if you look at the textbooks which were printed by the institute, because it has established a press. In fact, a lot of people wondered at that point that why do we need a press for? I think the persons or the person who was mainly responsible, Professor D.P. Patnaik, had thought quite carefully about this institute and had set up a press along with the institute, because it was very important that we bring out the textbooks, and the large number of textbooks that were possible and reference books that were possible to be brought out by this institute. Today I am told whenever I travel any parts of this country or in abroad, we find that these textbooks are used in the classrooms as help books by teachers all over the world, practically wherever Indian language teaching is going on. And they said that they have benefited immensely, although they don't know those people who have authored the textbook, they have probably never met them, but they have benefited immensely from these textbooks. Thirdly, at a point of time when computer science was not so developed, when there was not so much of development in the area of information technology and artificial intelligence, at that point of time what we meant by education technology was basically using the recorded speech either through visual medium or through the audio medium. So that was very important that the institute create radio courses, institute create cassette courses, and it also creates some impact through the visual medium. For this, a major ETU was set up within the institute, Education Technology Unit, and that unit has done whatever it could with the help of the academicians, the basically linguists, in creating the kind of technology which was important for that period of time, relevant for that period of time, through the cassette courses, radio courses, and the television. So I would therefore attribute to the entire past of CIIL of 30 years on focusing on these 3 different T's. And if it is not too much of a metaphor to look at this T, the T is giving you a crossroad. As you are walking through a particular road of development, taking your institute to certain direction, you reach a T, you reach a joint where the road gets split into 2 different directions, and you have to decide now which way to go to the left, turn to the right. And at the point of time when I have entered the institute, I think I was just situated in the middle of this T, planning to decide which way I would try to lead the institute to. And then, as I said, that I thought that I would link it up with another alphabet of English letters, that is the L, 3 different L's, which are the goals of linguistics and this particular institute.
Cut.